Let's quickly see what are the different ways of transforming images in this particular video. Now, when you're working on Photoshop, you might have different types of layers. Certain layers would be smart objects or pixel pieces, or the other kind could be just layers which are rasterized. Now, depending on whether the image is rasterized or not, there are different types of transforms that you can do. Let's go through all of these in detail. Let me first bring a picture over here. Let's say if I have this mountain climber image and I've placed it on the screen, this would be a smart object. You probably already know this. So this is the most easy way of transforming images, which is scaling. Scaling basically means changing the dimensions of the photo in X and Y directions. So that basically means I'm reducing the height of this photo in this way, and I'd probably reduce the width of the photo in this way. This option definitely comes when you're importing an image and will also be visible in certain other cases. Let me do this. Let me stick it to equal parameters. Let's say 4 and 4. Yeah, I think that's basically the constraint proportions. That's basically the size in which the photo had come, and I've only reduced the height and the width to 4% of its original value because of this. Now, once I've placed the image, let's go through the different types of transforms that are there. If I click on edit, I'd be able to see a few formats. Let's understand what transform is, and then we'll go into puppet wrap, perspective, and free transform as well. So under transform, the first option is something that's called again. That basically means repeat the last transform that I had done. Now in this case, I'd avoid that. I will probably come to this later. The one that we've seen just right now was the scale. That meant the height and the width can be changed. Now when I'm transforming using scale, if I hold shift, in that case, I will be able to change the height or the width in case I'm not holding it from the corner pin over here. If I was doing it directly from here, holding shift would have no impact on the transformation. But holding it over here, if I do not hold shift right now, you'd see the sizes are constrained. They are in the proportion that the image was in. But if I hold shift and change that, I will be able to snap into different directions or the different dimensions as well. If I let go of shift, it again snaps back to the original constraints. So this is scale. This is one of the most basic ones. Let me cancel this using this cross button. Let's select the other transform that we were looking at. And the next one that we'll see is rotate. Fairly simple. You can expect this image can be rotated in any different direction. Again, holding shift will allow me to snap it into different angles which are predetermined. So if I press shift, you can see the angles that it is going to be tilting or rotating the image is at 15-degree differences. So this is 15, then comes 30, 45, 60, 75, 80, 90, and so on. So holding shifts allow me to do that. If I don't hold shift, I can transform it at any particular angle that I want. Again, let me cancel this and moving on to the next transform, which is skew. Now with skew, the fact is the line or the transformation will happen in such a way that there is at least one line that does not move. So in this case, let's say if the bottom line is the one that's stuck by a pin, the line over here, the one that is on top, can be moved. So it does not allow the movement on one side and it allows movement only on the parallel side. Similarly, if I do that on the right side, you notice the left side is pinned in its original position. Right. So that was skew. Let me cancel this transformation and then move on to the next one, which is distort. Very similar to skew, but this time distort moves the other side of the image in in conjunction or in opposite dimensions or in opposite quantities in the other side. So if I have held this particular corner point, if I'm moving it up and down, you can see the corner point on the bottom left is also moving such that the image starts getting scaled up at that place, right? So that is basically distort. Distort means I am able to shift the entire perspective while sticking the other pins right over here. Cancelling this one again and moving on to the next one, which is perspective. Now, perspective, you might be able to think, I would want to change the perspective only in one dimension. So if I do it like this, it scales the opposite point from the corner also at an equal distance. So this allows me to set or create this in a perspective. If you probably noticed, this is something that's used a lot in the Star Wars movies. Let's try to create one of those. Let's try to create that Star Wars effect. If I close this, add a text layer in a galaxy far, far away. Let me break it into smaller lines. Select all, make it the center. Let's fix the size also in this way. Now with this, I have created the image, created the text. Let's place it somewhere in the center. And to transform this, because this is a text layer, it's not rasterized, it will not allow me to do a perspective wrap on it. I'd have to transform it or basically rasterize it into a pixel format so that Photoshop can break it down. So let's select the option to rasterize type. So once I have rasterized the layer, I have lost the editing capacity of the text and now it appears just as an image. But with this, now I can change the transform and make it into a perspective transform. Now with this, if I move this, you can see something very similar to what we have probably seen in the movies. This is how I can change the perspective of a layer. And that basically sums up most of the simple transforms. Let's get into something which is slightly more complicated. Let me select the transform for this. And let's go through. We've already gone through scale, rotate, skew, distort, and perspective. The next one is warp. The warp wrap in transform. When I select warp, the idea basically is the image is split into small grid. Now each of these grid layers, everything in that grid can be modified with little or almost no effect on the ones which are slightly far away. What that basically means is if I move this around, you'd see the layer immediately next to it, the grid pieces immediately next to it are moving somewhat, but the ones which are slightly far away, they don't see such an impact. So I can probably drag this all the way up till here and you'll see how this one gets squished. There's somewhat movement that have happened in these grids, but all in all, the impact is far lesser. Now with this, I can also transform it into a very peculiar shape if I'd want. So let's say and create it something like this. Or there are certain options that are also available. So there are certain options which are something like an arc. Now with this, I can reduce the height or the curvature of the arc. There is something arc lower, basically means just an extension on the bottom side. arc, upper extension. Very similarly on the top side, there is arch, bulge, shell, flag, wave, and couple of others. Let's see how does squeeze work. Yeah, and that's basically how we can squeeze or de-squeeze an image into a different format. Let's select on twist. I can twist an image from the center of the grid. Now, very similarly, if I would want to increase the number of grid elements in this layer, that can be done by using these split options. Now that basically means I can click one of these and create a new vertical split somewhere in the center. Yeah. With this, I've added more grid levels, and as you've seen earlier, you can see that the layer movement impacts the cells right next to it, but not the far away ones. I can also create a split which is horizontal and vertical both at this layer, and you can see the movement of these particular layers will impact the other ones very less to very less extent. That's basically warp transform. The next thing that you'd want to see is basically something called puppet warp. Now this is very similar to warp that we've seen just now, but in this you can see a big mesh, a very complicated mesh, which is designed by itself. Now each of these meshes, you can place a point which acts like a pin in the entire mesh. Think of it as a puppet. Now with puppet, there are few points that let you move the entire puppet. Very similarly, there are pins that we have placed in this image as well. And these images or these pins can be moved according to how you'd want it, while keeping the other ones constant. So if I move this, you'd see the other pins are limited and then they're not moving, but the entire grid around the other puppet is moving. There's of course going to be some extension. I can add in more pins if I would want a segment to not move. So let's say if I place a pin around this man over here, I can remove these pins. And let's say if I add a pin right over here, I'd be able to move this entire thing while the guy over there does not move. So that's puppet warp. And the last one that we see is perspective warp. With perspective warp, there are two steps that have to be done. The first is setting a layout. If I can draw a grid just like that, that's basically the perspective that I would want to play around with. And then I can warp it around these pits. Now, with the perspective set, you can see how the image warping can be done. Now, this is particularly useful in creating mockups or in creating designs on books or on paper in which the perspective is not exactly in front of you. So that's basically everything about transforms. We have seen puppet warp, perspective warp, transform, which has scale, rotate, skew, distort, and perspective. There's something called warp. Very simply, there are few options which are over here, which we'll probably go through very quickly. There are few simple options that says toggle 180 degree. That's basically rotating the entire thing. Rotate 90 degree clockwise, rotate 90 degree counterclockwise, flip horizontal and flip vertical. So when I flip horizontal, the entire image flips horizontally. So the guy comes over here, and if I do flip vertically, you can imagine that's guy in the top. And then we saw puppet and perspective warp. And lastly, there's something called free transform, which allows me to do anything over here. And I can right click over here and select the right option. So let's get it back into its original position. And with that, done. And that's perspective. And that's transform for you.